In my 38 years as a fire chief, I learned that the most dangerous fires aren't always the ones you can see. Sometimes they smolder in places you'd never think to look, growing hotter and deadlier until everything collapses. I thought I'd left those lessons behind when I retired 5 years ago. Then my grandson called me at 2 in the morning, and I realized the worst fire of my life was just beginning. The phone's ring cut through the silence of my bedroom like an alarm bell. My wife stirred beside me, and I grabbed the phone before it could wake her fully. The caller ID showed my grandson's number. Ryan, 15 years old. A good kid who never caused trouble. Ryan? What's wrong? Grandpa. His voice was shaking, barely above a whisper. I need you. I'm at the hospital. There was an accident at Mr. Blackwood's construction site. He brought me here, but Grandpa, it wasn't an accident. He's lying to everyone. He pushed me. And now he's saying I was trespassing, that I fell because I was somewhere I shouldn't be. Mom believes him. She's so in love with him, she won't listen to me. Please, you have to come. My blood ran cold. Thomas Blackwood, the man my daughter Claire had been dating for 8 months. A successful real estate developer who'd swept into our coastal town with big promises and bigger money. Claire had been a widow for 3 years since Ryan's father died in a car accident, and Blackwood had seemed like her second chance at happiness. They'd gotten engaged 2 months ago. Stay there. Don't say anything else to anyone until I arrive. I'm on my way. I was dressed and out the door in 5 minutes. The hospital was a 20-minute drive, but I made it in 12. My mind raced the entire way. Ryan wasn't the kind of kid to make up stories. If he said Blackwood pushed him, then something terrible had happened. The emergency room was quiet at this hour. I found Ryan in a curtained-off area, his left arm in a temporary splint, bruises already forming on his face and neck. Claire sat in a chair beside him, her face tight with worry and something else. Anger? Next to her stood Thomas Blackwood, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, his hand possessively on Claire's shoulder. Dad. Claire stood up when she saw me. Thank God you're here. Ryan had an accident. He was at one of Thomas's construction sites and fell from scaffolding. The doctors say his arm is broken and he has some bruising, but he'll be fine. I looked at Ryan. His eyes met mine, and I saw the fear there, and something else. Determination. That's not what happened, Ryan said quietly. I told you, Mom. He pushed me. Ryan, enough. Claire's voice was sharp. You shouldn't have been there in the first place. Thomas says he found you trespassing on the site after hours. You could have been killed. I wasn't trespassing. I was invited. Ryan's jaw set stubbornly. I went because he texted me, said he wanted to show me something, to get my opinion, since I'm interested in architecture. When I got there, he was acting strange, started asking me questions about Mom's finances, about you, Grandpa, about your pension in the house. Then he got angry when I said I didn't know. He grabbed my shirt and pushed me backward. I fell off the second-floor platform. That's ridiculous, Blackwood said smoothly. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man used to getting his way. Claire, your son is clearly confused from the fall. I found him on the site, yes, but I'd been driving by and saw someone moving around with a flashlight. I thought it was vandals. When I got there and realized it was Ryan, he'd already fallen. I immediately called 911 and brought him here. I studied Blackwood's face. In my years as fire chief, I'd investigated dozens of accidents, interviewed hundreds of people. You learn to spot a liar. Blackwood was good, but he had a tell. A slight tightening around his eyes when he spoke, a fractional pause before he answered. Ryan, I said gently, did you save the text message? His face fell. He made me delete it. Right before he pushed me, he took my phone and deleted it himself. Convenient, Blackwood said with a slight smile. Claire, I think Ryan needs rest. This has been traumatic for him. Perhaps he's having trouble remembering exactly what happened. Claire looked between her son and her fiancé, torn. I could see it in her face. She wanted to believe Ryan, but she also wanted to believe in Blackwood, in the future they were planning together. Dad, can I talk to you outside? Claire asked. We stepped into the hallway. Through the gap in the curtain, I could see Blackwood leaning over Ryan, saying something I couldn't hear. Ryan's face went pale. Dad, I know what you're thinking. Claire said. But Thomas wouldn't hurt Ryan. He's been so good to us. He's talking about adding Ryan to his company's summer internship program, helping him get into a good architecture school. Why would he do something like this? I don't know yet, I said carefully. But Claire, I've known Ryan his entire life. He doesn't lie. If he says Blackwood pushed him, then we need to take that seriously. He's a teenager who doesn't want me to remarry, Claire said, her voice cracking. Don't you think I know what this is? He's testing Thomas, testing me. But I can't let him manipulate me like this. I deserve to be happy again. Of course you do, but happiness isn't worth your son's safety. His safety isn't at risk. It was an accident, a stupid teenage decision to sneak onto a construction site. That's all. I wanted to argue, but I could see the defensiveness in her posture. Pushing now would only make her dig in harder. Instead, I changed tactics. Let me take Ryan home with me tonight. Let him stay with us for a few days while he recovers. Give everyone some space to calm down. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Maybe that's a good idea. But Dad, please don't fill his head with conspiracy theories. Thomas is a good man. I wasn't so sure about that, but I kept my thoughts to myself. An hour later, Ryan was settled in the guest room at my house. My wife Margaret had made him hot chocolate and fussed over his injuries until he finally dozed off. I sat in my study, thinking, something about this didn't sit right. Blackwood's story had holes, but without evidence, it was his word against a teenage boy's. The next morning, I made some calls. My first was to my old friend Detective Martinez. We'd worked together on several arson investigations over the years. He owed me a few favors. Danny, I need you to run a background check on someone. Thomas Blackwood, real estate developer, recently moved to town. The guy building those luxury condos on the waterfront? What's this about? I told him about Ryan's accident and allegations. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'll make some calls, Martinez said quietly. Give me a few hours. While I waited, I did some research of my own. Blackwood's company, Blackwood Development, had an impressive website showcasing dozens of projects across 3 states. High-end residential buildings, commercial spaces, even a few hotels. Everything looked legitimate, successful, professional. But when I started digging deeper, searching for news articles about his projects, I found something interesting. 3 years ago, one of his buildings in Oregon had a fire. 2 people died. The investigation ruled it an accident, faulty wiring. But in the comments section of a local news article, I found something that made my pulse quicken. A comment from someone claiming to be a former employee. Blackwood cuts corners everywhere. I reported code violations 3 times and got fired for it. Those people died because of his greed. I searched for more. Found another project in Washington where a balcony collapse injured 6 people. Again, the investigation ruled it an accident, but again there were whispers online about code violations and inspectors being bribed. Martinez called me back just before noon. Your instincts are good, he said. Blackwood's got a pattern. Nothing that's stuck legally, but there are complaints everywhere he's worked. Building code violations, suspicious accidents, employees who speak up getting fired or worse. One guy in Seattle claimed Blackwood threatened him, but he recanted before it went anywhere. And here's the interesting part. Every town Blackwood works in, he makes sure to get cozy with local officials. Campaign donations, charity events, the works. He's protected. Is he doing that here? Oh yeah. He's already donated $50,000 to the mayor's re-election campaign. He's on the planning commission's advisory board. And he's dating the daughter of our former fire chief. He's working his way into the community power structure like he's done everywhere else. My stomach sank. He's using Claire. Looks like it. Chief, I want to help, but without evidence of an actual crime, my hands are tied. Your grandson's accusation isn't enough, especially against someone with Blackwood's resources and connections. After we hung up, I sat there thinking, if Blackwood had pushed Ryan, there had to be a reason. What had Ryan said? Blackwood had been asking about finances, about my pension, about Claire's house. Why would he care about that unless he needed money? Unless his empire wasn't as solid as it appeared. I spent the rest of the day making calls to contacts in other cities where Blackwood had worked. By evening, I had a clearer picture. Blackwood's M.O. was consistent. He'd come into a town, wine and dine local officials, start a big development project, cut every corner possible to maximize profit, and then move on before the consequences caught up with him. The deaths, the injuries, the code violations, they were all part of the same pattern, and now he was doing it here. But why hurt Ryan? That piece didn't fit until I talked to my daughter that evening. "Dad, I need to ask you something," Claire said when she called. "Thomas mentioned that you have the house in your name, but you'd planned to leave it to me. Is that true?" "Yes, it's in the will." "Why?" "He suggested that maybe you could transfer it to me now, for estate planning purposes," he said, "to avoid probate later. He even offered to have his lawyer handle the paperwork for free." There it was. Blackwood wasn't just using my daughter for social connections. He was after her money, or more specifically, the money she stood to inherit. The house was worth almost $1 million in this market. If he married Claire and got his hands on that asset, he could use it as collateral for his projects. And Ryan had gotten in the way. A smart, observant 15-year-old who'd figured out something was wrong. So Blackwood had tried to scare him, or worse. "Claire, don't sign anything," I said. "And I think you need to hear what I've learned about Thomas." I spent an hour laying out everything I'd discovered. At first, she resisted, defending Blackwood. But as the evidence piled up, the deaths, the violations, the pattern of behavior, I saw doubt creeping into her eyes. "I need to think about this," she finally said. "Dad, if what you're saying is true, I brought this man around my son. I almost married him. You didn't know. He's good at what he does. That's how predators work." After we hung up, I sat with Ryan and told him everything. "I believe you," I said, "and we're going to prove what happened." "How?" Ryan asked. "It's my word against his. And he's rich and important." "He is. But I know something about buildings that he probably forgot. I spent almost 40 years inspecting them for fire safety. I know how to find violations. And if he's cutting corners here like he did everywhere else, I'll find the evidence." The next morning, I drove to Blackwood's construction site. The waterfront luxury condos, a 6-story building that was about 60% complete. I'd brought my old inspection gear, camera, and 40 years of experience knowing exactly what to look for. I didn't go in as a trespasser. I went in as a concerned citizen requesting a public safety inspection. It was my right, as a former fire chief. And technically, the site should have been secure if Blackwood was following regulations. It wasn't. The gate was unlocked. Safety signage was minimal. And once I got inside and started looking around, I found a disaster waiting to happen. Fire exits blocked by materials. Sprinkler system installation incomplete. Electrical work that looked like it had been done by someone's cousin's friend rather than a licensed electrician. Load-bearing walls that seemed suspiciously thin. And on the second floor, the section where Ryan had fallen, the scaffolding was improperly secured, and the safety railings were missing entirely. I documented everything, taking hundreds of photos. This building was a death trap. If it was completed and people moved in, it was only a matter of time before someone got hurt or killed. I was on the 3rd floor when I heard voices below. Blackwood's voice, and another man I didn't recognize. "The inspector's coming tomorrow," the other man said nervously. "We're not ready. Half this stuff isn't up to code." "It'll be fine," Blackwood said dismissively. "I've already taken care of it. Henderson owes me. He'll pass it with minor notes, and we'll fix just enough to satisfy any follow-up." "What about the kid? What if he talks?" "He already did. Nobody believed him. His grandfather's sniffing around, but he's a retired old man with no authority. By the time anyone takes him seriously, we'll have the certificate of occupancy, and the units will be sold. After that, it's the homeowner's problem, not ours." I held my breath, staying perfectly still. They were directly below me. "You shouldn't have hurt the kid," the other man said. "That was stupid. Reckless. He was about to figure things out. I saw it in his eyes. He's too smart for his own good, just like his grandfather. But I've handled it. Once I marry his mother, I'll have access to their assets, and we can leverage them for the next project. Everything's under control." They moved away, their voices fading. I waited 5 minutes, then carefully made my way out of the building. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. This man had deliberately hurt my grandson and was planning to marry my daughter for her money, all while building death traps and bribing inspectors. I drove straight to Martinez's office. "I need you to listen to something," I said, pulling out my phone. I'd been recording the entire time I was in the building. We listened to Blackwood's confession together. Martinez's face grew darker with each word. "That's bribery, fraud, and an admission of assaulting your grandson," Martinez said. "Plus, I can get building inspectors and the DA involved with this evidence. We can take him down." "How long will it take?" "I can get a warrant today. We'll need to coordinate with building inspectors. Maybe bring in the state attorney general's office since this crosses state lines. A few days at minimum. He's supposed to have dinner with Claire tomorrow night. He's going to pressure her to sign papers, transferring my house to her name so he can access it." Martinez thought for a moment. "Can you stall him? Keep him busy while we build the case?" An idea formed in my mind. A risky one, but it might work. What if we give him what he wants? Or make him think we are? I explained my plan to Martinez. He didn't like it, but he agreed it might be our best shot at getting Blackwood to incriminate himself further while we gathered more evidence. That evening, I called Claire. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the house. Maybe Thomas is right. Maybe it does make sense to transfer it now." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Really? Dad, I know this has been hard for you, with everything you've learned, but I've talked to Thomas, and he explained everything. Those articles you found, they're from disgruntled former employees. The investigations all cleared him. I really think you've been wrong about him." My heart sank. He'd gotten to her, convinced her I was the problem. Maybe I have been. Why don't the three of us meet tomorrow evening? We can discuss it properly. Thomas suggested dinner at his place. 7 o'clock? Perfect. After I hung up, I sat with Ryan. "Are you sure about this plan, Grandpa?" he asked. "What if something goes wrong? Then I'll handle it. But Ryan, I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, you stay safe. You stay with your grandmother. Don't try to be a hero." He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The next day moved slowly. Martinez worked with the DA's office and state building inspectors. They confirmed everything I'd found and more. Blackwood's building was a catastrophe waiting to happen, and he'd bribed at least 3 local officials to look the other way. The inspector he'd mentioned, Henderson, was already being questioned. By 6 o'clock, we were ready. Martinez had a team positioned near Blackwood's house. I was wearing a wire. If Blackwood said anything incriminating, we'd have him. Blackwood's home was a showpiece, a modern mansion overlooking the ocean. He answered the door with a broad smile, shaking my hand firmly. "Chief Anderson, good to see you. Claire's in the living room. Please, come in." Claire looked nervous, but hopeful. Blackwood had set out appetizers and expensive wine. He was playing the gracious host, the successful man welcoming his future father-in-law. "I'm glad we could do this," Blackwood said, pouring wine. "I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I want you to know that I love your daughter. I'm going to take care of her and Ryan. They're my family now." "That's good to hear," I said carefully. "Claire mentioned you wanted to discuss the house." "Yes, purely for practical reasons. Estate planning can be complicated, and with your age, it makes sense to start thinking about these things." With my age. The subtle dig wasn't lost on me. "I've brought the deed," I said, pulling papers from my jacket. "But I want to understand exactly what you're proposing." Blackwood's eyes gleamed. "It's simple. You transfer the property to Claire now. That way, when the time comes, there's no probate, no legal complications. It stays in the family." "And what happens after Claire and I are married?" I asked. "Would the house be joint property?" "That's between Claire and me," Blackwood said smoothly. "But yes, in a marriage, assets are typically shared. So you'd have access to it. Could use it as collateral, for instance, if you needed funding for a project." His smile tightened. "That's an odd question." "Is it?" "Because I've been doing some research, Thomas. Your company has a lot of debt. Your last 3 projects went over budget. You need capital." "Dad, what are you doing?" Claire asked, alarm in her voice. "I'm protecting my daughter," I said, keeping my eyes on Blackwood, from a con artist who's been using her to get access to money and connections. Blackwood's mask slipped, just for a second, I saw rage flash across his face. Then he was smiling again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think you've been listening to too many conspiracy theories," he said lightly. "Claire, your father is clearly struggling with letting you move on. It's common for parents to have trouble with their children remarrying." "Is it common for you to push 15-year-old boys off buildings?" I asked. "Dad, stop," Claire said. "You promised you'd let this go." "I can't let it go, not when I have proof." I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the construction site. The blood drained from Blackwood's face as his own voice filled the room, admitting to everything: hurting Ryan, planning to use Claire's assets, bribing inspectors. When it ended, there was a long, terrible silence. "You recorded me illegally," Blackwood said, his voice tight. "That's not admissible." "Actually, in this state, it is. One-party consent for recordings. And I was the one party." I stood up. "It's over, Thomas. The police know everything. The building inspectors are going over your site right now. Henderson's already talking. You're done." For a moment, I thought he might try to run. His eyes darted to the door, calculating. Then he lunged at me. I was ready. 64 years old or not, I'd spent decades staying in shape for the physical demands of firefighting. I sidestepped his rush and let his momentum carry him past me. He crashed into the coffee table, sending glass and wine flying. "Dad!" Claire screamed. Blackwood scrambled up, his face contorted with fury. "You old fool. Do you know what you've done? I could have made your daughter rich, given your grandson opportunities. But no, you had to play detective. You hurt my grandson. You threatened my family. The only opportunity I'm interested in is seeing you in prison." He came at me again, and this time connected. His fist caught me in the ribs, and pain exploded through my chest. I staggered back, and he pressed his advantage, grabbing me by the shirt and slamming me against the wall. That's when Martinez and his team burst through the door. "Police! Get on the ground!" Blackwood froze, then slowly raised his hands. 2 officers pulled him away from me and forced him face down on the floor. Martinez rushed over to me. "You okay, Chief?" "I've had worse," I said, though my ribs were screaming. "Worth it, though." Claire stood in the middle of the chaos, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I pulled her into a hug. "It's not your fault. He was good at what he does. But it's over now." They arrested Blackwood on assault, fraud, bribery, and a dozen building code violations. As more evidence emerged, the charges kept growing. The investigation spread to his other projects in other states. Victims came forward. Other officials he'd bribed were identified. The building he was constructing was condemned. Inspectors found that if it had been completed and occupied, it likely would have collapsed in a strong storm. The electrical work alone could have caused a fire that would have killed dozens. Ryan's testimony, backed by the recording and physical evidence, proved Blackwood had deliberately pushed him as a warning, to scare him into silence, to show the family that Blackwood was in control. The trial lasted 3 months. Blackwood was convicted on 27 counts and sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. His assets were seized to compensate his victims. But the story didn't end there. 6 months after the trial, I was invited to speak at the state legislature. They were passing a new law, the Anderson Building Safety Act, which mandated independent third-party inspections for all new construction, created a whistleblower protection program for construction workers, and established a database to track developers with code violations across state lines. Standing at that podium, looking out at the faces of legislators, victims, and families, I thought about how it had all started. A phone call in the middle of the night, a grandson who needed help. In my career as a fire chief, I told them, I learned that prevention is worth more than any amount of heroic rescue. We can't wait for buildings to burn, for people to die, before we act. This law isn't about one bad developer. It's about creating a system where people like Thomas Blackwood can't operate in the shadows, where children like my grandson don't have to risk their lives to expose the truth. Ryan was in the audience with Claire and Margaret. He'd healed well, physically at least. The emotional scars would take longer, but he was in therapy, and every day was a little better. After the ceremony, reporters asked me questions. How did I know Blackwood was dangerous? What made me keep investigating when everyone else had accepted his story? I listened to my grandson, I said simply. And I remembered something I learned in my first week as a firefighter. The most dangerous fires are the ones you can't see. The ones smoldering in the walls, hidden, growing stronger. Thomas Blackwood was that kind of fire. But here's what I also learned. One person with courage and determination can stop an inferno before it spreads. It doesn't take an army. It just takes someone who's willing to look for the smoke, to trust their instincts, and to act before it's too late. A young reporter in the back raised her hand. What would you say to people who think they've noticed something wrong but are afraid to speak up? I thought about Ryan, scared and alone on that hospital bed, brave enough to tell the truth even when his own mother didn't believe him. I'd say that your voice matters. Whether you're 15 or 75, whether you're powerful or powerless, whether anyone believes you or not, the truth is the truth. And sometimes, one person speaking up, one person refusing to look away, can change everything, not just for themselves, but for everyone. As I walked out of the Capitol building that day, Ryan caught up with me. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Anything. How did you know? That night when I called, how did you know I was telling the truth? I put my arm around his shoulders. Because I've known you your whole life. I know your character. And because I remembered something my own grandfather told me when I was about your age. He said, the world will try to teach you to doubt yourself, to be quiet, to go along. But the moment you ignore that voice inside that tells you something is wrong, that's the moment you stop being who you really are. You listened to that voice, Ryan. You stayed true to yourself, even when it was hard. That's real courage. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I'm glad you answered the phone that night. So am I, kid, so am I. A year later, I got a letter from a woman in Nevada. Her brother had worked for Blackwood 5 years ago, had tried to report code violations, and had died in what was ruled an accidental fall from scaffolding. She'd never believed the official story, but she had no proof, no way to fight a wealthy developer. Reading about Blackwood's conviction had finally given her closure. Your grandson saved my brother's memory, she wrote. And you both saved countless others who would have been Blackwood's future victims. Thank you for being someone who listens, who believes, who acts. I keep that letter in my study, next to a photo from the day the Anderson Building Safety Act was signed. Ryan's in that photo, standing next to the governor, his arm healed, his smile genuine. He's talking about studying architecture in college now, about designing buildings that are not only beautiful but safe, about making sure what happened to him never happens to anyone else. Sometimes I think about that phone call, about the choice I made to believe a scared 15-year-old boy over a powerful, persuasive man, about how easy it would have been to dismiss Ryan's fears, to accept the simple explanation, to let Blackwood's charm and status override my instincts. And I think about all the times in my career when I made that same choice to investigate when others wanted to move on, to ask questions when the answers seemed obvious, to trust that small voice that says something isn't right here even when everyone else is telling you everything is fine. That's what I hope people remember from this story. Not that I was a hero, I wasn't. I was just a grandfather who loved his grandson and a fire chief who knew how to spot danger. But I made a choice. To listen, to believe, to act. And sometimes, that's all it takes to stop the fire before it burns everything down.